All right, we're on the road for this week's podcast. As you can tell, I'm outside University Stadium. I dropped by the football team's practice, which we can talk about Lobo football, how weird it is that it's an open, it's like a glass-nosed type feeling around Lobo football this year. They're actually accommodating and welcoming. And James, you can see his internet's a little glitchy from home today.
A
He's
little
got to
bit,
crank
yeah.
that hamster. He needs some PEDs for his hamster wheel. And hopefully we don't lose them during the podcast. But James, a lot happened over the weekend. We had our NorthStars Athletes of the Year. There was the Final Four.
Yeah, we did.
Every time they went down to the left end of the court during the national championship game, you could see former athletic director from UNM, Eddie Nuñez, flexing his big guns, along with Dave Williams, former deputy AD at UNM. So we could talk about the Final Four. The podcast will include stuff about, the transfer portal, which doesn't have a lot going on for UNM. And then,
Yeah,
spring sports, we're in the middle of spring sports season already. So,
we
so let's,
certainly are. No, hey, come on,
let
Will. They're up to three. They got three guys now.
three guys, and still waiting on the big one to see if Drew Washington comes back. I think I might have even mentioned this last week. The two guys I thought would come back, there was Xavier now. So it tells you how
Yeah,
much I know. I thought
goes to
Jovan
show you
and
how well you know this team.
I thought Jovan and Applesauce would come back, and they're both gone. So they're out of here. So
Oh,
it's
you had a feeling they're either going to end up back here or probably following Patino, because I don't think anybody's dropping three mil on them to come play.
it is. You feel bad for UNM fans, and we did touch on this last week. Is you have such a good season, such a 2-3 year run where they were ranked in the top 25 2 out of 3 years. They went to the postseason 3 straight years. You finally win an NCAA tournament game, and then 48 hours later, everyone's gone. You have a new coach. And I went to the press conference last week, and I've said this before, but I hope he's a better coach than he is a public speaker, because he came across a little nervous. And you can't, he's a guy who's basically coaching at Eastern New Mexico or Highlands. He was at a D2 school that transitioned into D1 just a few years ago. And his introductory press conference, there was 300 people there. And he finds out very quickly there's no off season for Lobo basketball. So it's got to
No, there
be
isn't.
it's got to be intimidating to walk into that. Where he
Yeah,
maybe talked to three media people the entire time he's at San Diego. Now he's just getting inundated by it. So
yeah, and
yeah,
everybody wants a piece of them, right?
yeah, everyone wants to know. One of the first questions thrown at him, which I thought was crazy, is how much money do you have in your NIL account? The guy just
Yeah,
got
let me
here.
pull that figure out of my back pocket here. So, because
And if
that's exactly
even
what they
if I
told me.
even if I knew it, I wouldn't tell you, because then I'd give the entire country a secret of how much money we do or don't have. And everyone wants to know about the transfer portal. Who are you going to sign? Hey, coach, why haven't you signed the 7'2" point guard who can handle the press, shoots 88% from the free throw line, and is a low post, low block monster? Why haven't you signed that guy yet? What's wrong with you? So
Yeah. Boy, you
no
need to see
press.
the hamster wheels. You're talking about hamster wheels. I'm sure his is spinning overtime right now.
Yeah. So I did talk to the people at UNM, and look, they're accommodated. They're going to let him come join our esteemed podcast, maybe as early as next week. I guess we could have had him on today. I didn't know that, because he did. It turns out he did not go to the Final Four. I want to thank them for telling me that today while I was at Lobo football practice. Like, oh yeah, he's just been here the whole time. So, uh,
Yeah, he's been busy studying our podcast. He was
right.
ready to. I bet you he was going to hit us with questions.
Like, who are these clowns and where are they from? One's hanging out in his living room, the other one's like on location or is in his garage somewhere. So who are these
His secret
guys?
dungeon, man. That's what it is.
Golly. But no, this is the first time I've been out to Lobo football practice. I came out for the scrimmage last weekend a little bit. It was different because that was an organized game. But it's weird, James. I covered this team last year when Bronco Mendenhall was here. You and I were both around when Danny Gonzalez was
Yep.
a coach. Danny was accommodating. He was welcoming. But when Bronco got here, he put up, man, it was like the
Oh,
border
I know.
wall.
He had the padlock up before he had the gate locked before we even showed up.
Yeah, and it was very structured. Maybe the half an hour for the media a couple times a week, and
Hmm.
he didn't want to address anything, didn't want to talk about strategy, nothing. Whereas now you walk in and Jason Eck it's open to the public. and they actually send out an email to the media yesterday saying, "Hey, why
Yeah,
don't you come
twice,
out?" Yeah,
twice, twice they
twice.
said it just to make sure you knew.
I'm working. I'm taking Mondays off. I'm working in my backyard, and I felt, well, I guess I better go to Lobo football practice on Tuesday. I feel terrible now.
Do
So
you
I
think they're
showed up.
lonely? Do you think Frank's lonely? Is that
They
why?
they might be lonely, and today there's only 2 media members out here today, so I didn't know anything to ask. So I was like, those sure are shiny helmets, Coach. I like it. You're looking good out there. So no, but I was impressed. They're the team. They I don't think they're going to be as bad as I thought they were going to be because they lost a lot of people when Bronco took off, and really there's like 50 or 60 new guys in this team, and
Mhm.
it's not quite as bad as across the street at basketball, but they're completely rebuilding. And the defense looks good. It's like a pro set offense. And I think the only concern right now is quarterback. You lost a first team all conference
You
quarterback,
did.
and I don't care who you bring in, it's going to be tough. But you know what? The good thing about Lobo football is the expectations aren't nearly as high here as they are over there
Over
at the
across the
pits.
street, yeah.
Yeah,
No,
yeah,
but it's interesting. There are very similar parallels. I mean, you talk about, Bronco left almost as soon as the season ended last year, and everybody was really excited about what he did. And next thing you know, boom, he's off to Utah State.
yeah.
And then that comes in and everybody's leaving. And from what it sounds like, what you observed was, this team's actually going to be all right. And I think there were a lot of concerns. Again, similar situation where you had literally half the team jumping off the bandwagon, and then apparently Jason's done a pretty good job of refilling and replenishing, or at least filling those holes and everything. And I'm sure the recruiting part still hasn't stopped for him yet. I'm sure there are guys that they're probably still feeling out and maybe will get, because that's just how things are. It seems like you're recruiting almost 24/7 nowadays. But maybe we could take a sense of optimism from that and transfer it over to basketball, where like we said before, they're actually up to three people. They grabbed the kid from San Diego, who was a commit to him at UC San Diego, kid that scored over 3,000 points in his school in San Diego. And I'm trying to remember the name of it. And I think it's Carlsbad, I want to say, but I might be wrong about that. But they get a kid like that, a 6'4", 6'5" guard that actually looks like he could play. And then I believe recently he got another one of his former Titans to come with him, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's one a 6'6" guard who came over,
Yes.
who committed in the portal. Just I think it was yesterday or Sunday.
Yes, it
So
was.
yeah, and I think inevitably you'll get a couple of Lobos that do come back. Not the guys that I thought were going to come back, but the only player from last year's team that has not actually jumped into the portal is Ibrahima Sacco, who barely played. So like,
Yeah.
Sacco's the only one. He's. I feel bad for him. The guy's probably over there. He's the janitor, the secretary. He's answering phones. He's doing all that stuff. If they do team workouts, he's the only guy who shows up. So he's running wind sprints by himself. So I feel bad for the guy, but it's a rough situation for basketball, but it will get better. I know people are tending to panic. People are kind of jumping off ship a little bit, but I think they'll be all right. The basketball team definitely has money, and they can find some players in the portal. And I know people are hoping that they would have landed a couple of All-Americans by now, but it's the way it is. It's how things are at UNM. So, yeah, I think they'll be fine.
Yeah, I agree. And then, kind of keeping the basketball theme there. I mean, we can kind of talk a little bit about last night's game. We did have some UNM representation in the form of Eddie Nuñez and David Williams, both former
Yeah,
UNM,
yeah.
former UNM AD, and then his associate. Both of them hoping like heck that their team could pull that off. But, it's funny. We were talking about. I was talking to a couple of people about this. The teams in the mid '80s, the Five-Star Majama teams, couldn't stop anybody. And then last night, Houston needed a bucket and they couldn't get one. So talk about just hitting both ends
Right,
of
right.
him missing both ends of the court there, and 40 years apart, literally.
Well, I did notice that because every time they came down to that end of the floor, you could see Eddie Nuñez and Dave Williams sitting behind the Houston bench. And with about 7 minutes to go, Eddie disappeared. So I'm thinking, I wonder if he snuck down to Florida's side and took off his white three-quarter hoodie and he's showing his Gator Chomp shirt. Like, because he did graduate from Florida. and now he's the AD in Houston. So the guy, either way, he had a good night last night. But
No,
Dave
he did.
Williams, Dave Williams left New Mexico like basically 10 minutes ago, and so you see him behind the scenes. He's he's glad handing everybody. He's hugging people like they don't even know who this guy is. He just got here. So
His "Hi, my name is" tag is still fresh on his shirt,
right,
and
yeah,
he's acting like he knows everybody, right?
yeah. We did get some more basketball news today. Right before we started doing this podcast, New Mexico Highlands announced that they have replaced Mikey Dominguez as the head coach. They actually had an agreement with this guy right around the time Mikey's announcement came out. And it's Zach. I don't know if I'm pronouncing his last name right. It's spelled September with an R-E at the end. So it's either September or September. Zach September from Tarleton State. He did have some time down at New Mexico State too. So he knows the state pretty well. And he's got at least a background at the Division I level because Tarleton State's a member of the Western Athletic Conference. So, it's a different thing though to go from Division I to Division II. In Division II, the lower end of the spectrum is New Mexico Highlands, where the budget is not terribly big, and you're playing in a tough conference too. So, good luck to Zach.
No, absolutely. And he's gonna have his work cut out from him. And I think he spent 2 years with. I think it was he spent a couple of years at NMSU. Was that with Hooten, if I
Yes,
recall correctly?
yeah, Jason Newton's been there for 2 years, and so he's kind of got some ties to Hooten. So there's that. But you could hire John Wooden, and he's going to have a hard time winning at New Mexico Highlands just because they just don't have a lot of money. And you're recruiting to Las Vegas. I remember back in the day, like 20 years ago, when I was working for another publication, when volleyball used to be good at Highlands, and the coach would joke around. She was from Hawaii. He said, "Yeah, I would recruit kids, telling them to come to Las Vegas to play volleyball." They had never seen Las Vegas, New Mexico, so she never actually corrected him, saying it was Las Vegas, New
Vegas, New
Mexico.
Mexico, not
Yeah, you
Vegas.
show up and you show the brightest lights are at the Taco Bell down on 8th Street. So it's like that's how she used to get. Of course, now the internet being what it is, but back in the olden days, like 20 years ago, that's kind of how it went.
Yeah, the naivete was a little bit higher.
Exactly. Yeah. And look, over the weekend too, we did announce that we had our NorthStars Athletes of the Year for the winter sports season, which is always one of those things where you're going to offend some people because inevitably we picked the wrong kid or we picked someone that wasn't quite as deserving. So it's
That's
always
interesting too. I haven't gotten an email yet saying that you got this wrong. So I'm thinking, yeah, we must have nailed it.
yeah. Well, I mean, look, you covered high school sports more than I did, but and really when it comes to NorthStars for the Santa Fe New Mexican, it's more like James Barron's favorite player. So let's start with basketball because when it came to basketball, James, I really deferred everything to you.
I know you deferred to me. I think you saw your scope of understanding was basically Vegas, it was Robertson and St. Mike's, and maybe a little bit of Indian School, and that's it. Everybody else was pretty oblivious to you. Let's be honest.
Yeah, and my standard answer for everything you were going to say today was like, well, good ball handler, nice hops, vertical movement was good. Like I don't have no idea what you're talking about.
You don't know, but
outside of Jesse James, I have a good idea.
Yeah,
for Jesse
we did
James.
see Jesse James, and I think you made a pretty good argument for him. The hard part for me was the big school boys. Josiah Fresquez over at Espanola, really was the guy that carried that team to the semifinals. Had a great game in the quarterfinals against Silver with a 39-point performance. They really don't get that far without him. And he's a very dynamic guard and a guy that'll probably, obviously as a senior, he's probably going to end up playing somewhere maybe D2, who knows. But really great ball player. But then you look at what Jesse James did and the fact that and this is something that I wrote in the in his bio. There was the two losses that they had were were the games where he was hurt. I know you were there at the Robertson game when they lost by 20, and you didn't even know that he'd been hurt because he tried to play through it and everything. But he missed the next game against Indian School, and those are the two games that they lost in district play before they turned it around. And the funny thing is that all four Robertson's losses came when he wasn't there because he missed the first two games of the season covering, or he was at the Red Green football All-Star game, and so they were missing him and like two other guys. and Robertson lost 2 games there at the tournament there in Sandia Prep. But when they had Jesse James, they were undefeated and obviously state champions. So that kind of made that kind of tipped the scales in his favor. On the girls' side, I thought. I thought maybe Tana Lopez probably could have made an argument for the small school girls, but Natalia Stout was just far and away. I mean, she's probably the best small school player in the state. Just being 5'6", 5'7", being able to post kids up and get rebounds. I mean, shoot, she led Pecos in almost every single major category. Whether you're talking about steals, assists, rebounds, points scored. She was a triple threat, a quadruple threat, just at everything that she did. And that's a big reason why Pecos was able to get as far as they did. So, I mean, it was clear. I think she was far and away, the right choice for that.
Yeah, and head to head, I mean, they play each other, so
she beat him 2 out of 3 times.
Yeah.
Got to remember that too.
Yeah, Tana Lopez. I had a chance to interview her after their state tournament games, and she's just a good kid. Tough way to have their season end the way it did, though. But
no, it was. But that was kind of the challenge that Mesa Vista had, I think, all year long, was that they really relied a lot on Tana to kind of be to be that that leader on the court and everything, especially from a scoring standpoint. And the rest of the team, even though they improved, just not quite enough. It'll be interesting to see what happens next year. They're losing a player that averaged almost 20 points and led the team in rebounding. Even for being 5'5", 5'6" guard, and apparently my understanding is that she's leaning toward going into Mexico Highlands, so might not be the last that we hear of her. At least up north, she'll be playing for the Cowgirls starting next year, it sounds like.
And then wrestling, I always lean towards the person who's going to jump off the top rail and smash someone with a chair, but apparently there wasn't anyone of that caliber this year, so we had to go with the standard wrestler, which is always disappointing to me. I'd like to see somebody come out wearing a tutu or something, but it just didn't happen. I think they need to.
There are no heels in high school wrestling, dude. So sorry to disappoint you on that end.
So awful. I think until they start doing that, I'm going to leave wrestling up to you. But just talk about your choices for wrestling.
Well, with wrestling, Cruz Martinez was, the clear front runner for that. I mean, we could have had an argument for Leighton Opari from Santa Fe High if he'd been able to finish off his season there in the finals of the 215-pound heavyweight or the 215-pound class. The Cruz 28-1, and that was with him missing a month of the season because of a knee injury. Lost one time out of his out of his weight class, but in his weight class he was undefeated. So clearly the best wrestler in northern New Mexico, and one of the best wrestlers in the state. I mean, when you consider he's one of, I think, what they say, 26 wrestlers who have won 4 state titles in their career, and he's one of them. So he definitely made a statement there on the final day of the season there.
Man, and Leighton Opari's off season is just going to be, I can't even imagine what goes through his mind when he gets that close. You figure you can take it either way. You can either become the Vision Quest, that kind of obsession with winning it next year, or you could just say, what the hell, that I'm just going to be Joe
done.
High School. Yeah.
No, I sincerely think that he will definitely recover from this rebound, and I definitely think that he will make his way back to the finals there at 215, and I wouldn't be surprised if he wins at all. I think those are the kind of things we've seen those stories before, where a kid that, especially in the situation that he was in, I mean, he was in control of that match early on, and I think he just kind of, I just think him trying to pin the kid and not being able to pull it off in the first period really just kind of it affected him the rest of the way, and I think he was a little fatigued by the time he got to the third period, and that's why the kid from Cleveland was able to beat him. But it's a lesson learned, and I'm sure he'll get better. And besides, he's still got to get through the football season too. On top of that, he's going to be one of their top offensive and defensive linemen coming back from last year's 2-18. So he's got a chance to take out some of his frustrations at least 10 times a week during the fall.
But Wendy Shepard, I know it's still an emerging sport with girls wrestling, but like it used to be where if you showed up for girls wrestling, you could do well, and now it's actually growing. I know technically it's one of the fastest growing, if not the fastest growing sport under the NMA umbrella. But just talk about the seasons we had.
No, it definitely is, and I think Wendy was kind of a perfect example of that. Girl that finished third last year at 138 pounds, then she moves up a weight class. Matter of fact, she's another one. Her only loss the entire year was to her teammate, who ended up losing in the finals in the 152-pound class. Jake Blackheart. They faced each other in January, and she lost to Jade by 1 point. Other than that, she wasn't beaten by anybody in her weight class at all. So and she finished off with a great pin against the Sandia wrestler. So she that's a great way to finish her career, especially starting as a seventh grader. And she said she didn't even realize how good she could be until she got that third place finish last year, and then that kind of spurred her on into this season.
Yeah, those are the best things about covering high school sports is sometimes you just run into a kid who kind of found something inside, tapped into something that they didn't know was there, and just made something out of it. And those are always the most special stories, just because like everything's unexpected, everything's brand new. Where some of these other kids, they develop physically early, and the expectations are real. It's always there, and either they're met or not. But it's a different vibe when it comes to those things. But yeah, I always enjoy talking to kids that just like, hey, you know what? Turns out I am pretty good at this, so works out well.
No, it does, and I'll be curious to see how how the state of girls wrestling continues, because I think
Mm-hmm.
over the last 2 or 3 years we've definitely seen a significant rise in that. It's still not in every school, and I think that'll will eventually get to that point. But a lot of wrestling coaches that I've talked to said that the boys sport seems to be struggling a little bit more, at least as far as numbers, and I think that's why they're really excited about the interest that they're seeing on the girls side.
Yeah, I think a lot of that has to do with lack of college programs in the state of New
Yep,
Mexico.
that's
When
true.
these schools quit wrestling on that level, when UNM did it, what, 25, 30 years ago, and I know Highlands is still tapped into it, but it's just it's different when you're the sport you're involved in, when you dedicate yourself to, just isn't available in this area, and it's such a big thing in the Midwest. It's on a different level in the Midwest, and here it's just kind of this satellite entity where you do well in the state of New Mexico. That's neat, but what does it do for you? And I think ultimately a lot of these kids, you're out there participating for the fun of it, but some of these guys want to actually move on to the next level, and you're just not going to get looked at in the state of New Mexico. You're just not going to do that.
No,
So
that's very true, and especially, and that's even with, considering that Highlands is here,
mhm.
right up the road. But even with them, I mean, they kind of understand that, the bulk of that team is at least your better wrestlers are probably going to come out of state.
Yeah.
The quality in New Mexico isn't quite as strong, and the guys that do the state the top caliber wrestlers the state produces, they all tend to leave out of state.
Yeah.
They go to the upper echelon programs, and they're not gonna stay around here and everything. But it's nice to see, and I wonder that's how soon you'll see Highlands maybe try to dip its toe into maybe into women's wrestling and everything. But that's another avenue that I think that should be explored, at least statewide. And then kind of piggybacking off of that, I mean, you saw swimming, so we can
Yeah.
kind of talk about you can talk about Ray Lee and just her amazingness in the sport that doesn't seem to hurt her, unlike what cross country and track have done to her.
Yeah, the thing about her is she was injured. She competed all season with that, and then she had some personal stuff going on too.
Mm.
But she still won one of the two events that she was in. She finished second in the other, and she's on to bigger and brighter things. She's going off to Duke, where maybe she can
Yeah,
console the leftovers of the men's basketball team when she gets there. But look, she's walking into one of the best swimming conferences in the country, because they have Stanford, they have Virginia, and
hmm
obviously Duke. So it's going to be fun for her, and we may not hear a lot from her in the next year or two, because Duke's swimming team is pretty good. Yeah, she could, with her drive and with her just God-given ability, I think she'll be just fine. And both of her parents are Division I athletes, so she'll
yeah.
do well.
So
But by and large, the look, Santa Fe High finished eighth for boys and girls, which is really, really good finish for them. Yeah, of course, you have Los Alamos that did well, but the state swimming meet did not have a lot of star power from our area. Like, we struggled to find the best
yeah,
boys
we
swimmer,
did.
And fortunately, Ian from Santa Fe High did enough to get our attention. But yeah, it was not a great year for swimming in this area outside of Rayleigh Hunt and maybe Ian for Santa Fe
And the
High.
nice thing is Ian will be back next year, so he's got a chance to build upon this, and I'm sure he'll probably win. He'll probably win a state title next year. I think when you look at how close he came, like you had in your story on in the 50 free. I got
Mm-hmm.
to imagine one of those two events that he's in, he'll probably end up with a medal there, and with Rayleigh. I mean, the book isn't quite closed on her high school career because she's still one of the top runners in the state,
Mm-hmm.
especially in the 800. She's actually got the best time in the 8 as we speak right now, and she seems to be running fairly well, and she seems to have overcome, like you said, she's dealt with some injuries with her knee, with her legs, and obviously some other things that she was dealing with as well. But she's performing well, and we'll probably see her next week. And not that we want to tease next week's podcast, but whether or not we get Coach Eck or Coach Olen on here, we'll definitely talk about the Sepulveda meet because that's coming up here in 6 days, and Northern New Mexico should be well represented in that, and she'll be one of them.
We're the spring sports for me are my favorite time of the year. I love basketball because we're indoors. The excitement of
Like the
small
detour
school hoops.
shorts.
Yeah, you could do that. But I love spring sports. I'm a huge baseball guy, so I love covering high school baseball. Looking forward to that. But go backtracking a little bit. I know the NMA has explored the possibility of adding flag football. They've looked into it.
Yeah.
They've also discussed boys volleyball, which had some movement before it got shot down just about month or two ago in their
I just
committee
don't think there's enough.
meetings.
I don't think there's quite enough interest. I think there were like 10 teams.
Yeah,
They really haven't gotten over that plateau.
yeah, and like they've added powerlifting, which is powerlifting. I know you cover the
Yeah,
powerlifting state
yeah, this weekend.
championships
Yeah.
this weekend. So yeah, I like that the NMA is adding more options. I think a flag football thing would be a lot of fun. It'd be busy. We'd be you and I
Oh,
would
it
be
definitely.
it'd be busy
Oh,
because you have,
maybe,
yeah,
maybe.
yeah, you'd have boys and girls soccer, you have regular football, flag football, cross country. In the fall, it would be crazy.
Oh
So
no, they would run that in the spring. I'm telling you right now, that's when they would run flag football. So it would be one more sport that we gotta worry about in to end the season with and everything. So adding
spring
that to all the
football in New
sports
Mexico, where it snows one day and 4 days later it's 80
later.
degrees.
Heck, sometimes it's in the same day. I
Yeah,
was
yeah,
when I was at the Golden Spikes doing my story on Bryce Mountain. I was telling somebody there was one year where it started like 50, 60 degrees. I'm in short sleeves and it's really nice. By noon, I'd put on my jacket and the wind had started whipping up. And by the time we got to the end of the meet, which is like about 3:30, 4 o'clock, it had started flurrying.
yeah,
You know,
yeah.
and that was, I mean, we basically got 3 out of the 4 seasons in like 5 hours.
That's like your opening night at Isotopes Park. I'm right across the street from Isotopes Park, and the same thing. Where it's like, thank
Oh, that
goodness
was
they had the
horrible.
press box.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, it was horrible to watch the temperature drop. But we got there about 4 o'clock, and we were doing some of our interviews and stuff, and it's 67 degrees, but there's still a lot of wind. But the moment that cloud cover rolled in and the winds just kept howling, by 6, I think it was almost 7 o'clock. By the time we got to that point, we saw the temperature had already dropped to 40, and it
Yeah,
got down to I think it got below 40 by the end of the game, and the wind chill made it about 30.
yeah.
So I was glad that I had done all my work pre-game, so that way I didn't have to go out there and wander out in that, or have to scurry down to the dug or to the clubhouse, for interviews and stuff. It was just, I could go home at the end of the day.
So COVID changed a lot for the Isotopes
Oh, it
because
certainly has, and I should remember it's actually they have the Zoom calls. They
yeah,
don't really bring us down
which
there
is a
anymore, but they used to.
huge drag. Oh gosh,
Yeah,
covering the Isotopes back in the day, where you could go to batting practice, hang out by the turtle while these guys were taking BP, and you could interview guys as they were coming out of the cage, and you could sit in the dugout and talk to guys as they came in from doing fielding practice, and then afterwards you could go down to the clubhouse. You could walk right up to a guy's locker and interview somebody.
yeah,
Now you just don't do that. The access is so limited, and I found this out too during when I went to the NCAA tournament in Cleveland. Is here the access is so restricted. You cannot get a one-on-one interview with anyone here.
yeah.
But out there, open locker room. You just walk in and all these guys are just sitting around, and it felt almost off
And
to
they're
be
probably
in there.
shocked to see you. They're like, "What are you doing here?"
Hey, I had no idea. I'd never seen you stand up because usually you're sitting in the first row down here. I had no idea how
Yeah, they
tall
just
you
thought you
were.
were half a dude.
Right, exactly. So some of the best conversations I ever had with these guys were in Cleveland, and then they're all gone 2 days later. So they all quit. So tells you what kind of
Did they
impact
give
I
any
had
bro
on.
hugs or anything when they left? When you left them, man,
Yeah,
knowing that this was going to be the last time?
Borovichinen was kind of, although I thought for sure he was going to stick around, but Borovichinen was a little emotional when it was over too. So I of course, in hindsight, being 2020, I should have seen it back then, but I didn't. But yeah, it's a weird time. I don't know. It's media coverage has definitely changed. Where high schools are much more open, in college
Yes.
and professional level, it's not. It's difficult to get behind the scenes the way we used to. So, wah,
That,
wah.
yeah, now that
I
you
know.
said that, Joey's probably going to restrict us to like the first 15 minutes of practice.
Oh
Hey,
man. No, well, next week if I try to do it from here, because they're going to watch this, they're going to kick me out of there. I won't be able to do it from the parking lot of the football stadium. I have to be across the
dude,
street
do you
next
know how
week.
much money we're generating for them right there, just with that with that advertising right there behind you? We
Look at
should be
that right
charging
there.
them. Yeah, look at that.
I don't have
Like,
my graphic that I made last week for the Angels countdown either. They're up to 6 wins. I'd like to let you know as of today, Tuesday. So they're only 57 wins away from getting to the magic 63 to avoid the 100 loss season. So keep my candle burning for the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim of California. So
hey, well, my Red Sox are 6-6, man, and they got off to a hot start there after finally beating Baltimore and then sweeping St. Louis. So I was kind of happy about that. So I got plenty. Of course, our goal's a little bit higher. We're shooting for 90 wins. You're just hoping not to hit 100 losses. So
and there's not an Angels fan on earth. And if there's any Angels fan listening to watching this podcast, they all know what I'm about to say. Is 1986 absolutely cannot stand the Red Sox. They don't even have a problem with the Yankees or the Dodgers
gee, why would that
or,
be?
or the A's. But I remember I was in high school back then, and I remember sitting watching Game 5 of the
Hmm.
1986 American League Championship Series, and they made a comment about how bad Bill Buckner's knees were. And they said, well, he's planning to have an off-season procedure. And I remember turning to my dad saying, well, the off-season for the Red Sox starts in about 10 minutes.
10 minutes.
Little
Yeah,
did I
yeah,
know. And that's a scar. That's like a Harry Potter
dude.
scar across my forehead that I've had since 1986. And yeah,
I
I despise the Red Sox.
Yeah, well, I lived in Los Lunas. That was our first. That was our first year living in Meadow Lake, which is like 13 miles outside east of Los Lunas. So I had to pray for my bus to get there on time. I caught the top of the ninth there, right when the Red Sox were starting to make their rally and everything, and I got there maybe 5 minutes before Henderson hits that home run.
Well, if you ever want to watch it, I have it on VHS tape in my garage. I don't know why I do
Oh,
that.
dude,
It's like,
I YouTube it like every other night just to remind me of the good old days, especially
oh,
just to remind me of how sad it made you.
it took them another 15 years to get to win a World
16 years,
Series,
yeah. So,
to
but you won
finally
one,
win
man.
a.
You won one sooner than the Sox did.
Yeah, and then they made a movie about that season. Yeah, Moneyball was based around the
Yeah,
year that the Angels won the World Series, and then
but they never mentioned the Angels.
never mentioned that. Hey, by the way, the Angels won the World Series that year. They finished right behind the A's, and during the 20-game Brad Pitt winning streak with a dramatic home run and all that stuff, the Angels only lost 3 games during that streak. They only lost a game and a half to them in the standings during that 20-game winning streak. They were right on them the entire time, and the better team wound up winning. So there you go.
Yeah, it did. You know, and it's funny when you watch that movie and you realize they made it sound like Scott Hatteberg was the reason the A's
Yeah,
won as
yeah,
many games as they did. And it's like, did you forget about Mark Mulder, Barry Zito, and
yeah.
oh
The
shoot,
big
who's the
three,
big three that they had? Yeah,
and they also
yeah.
had the MVP too. The Tejada was the
Yeah.
MVP that year.
Miguel Tejada. They had Eric
Chavez at third.
Chavez.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but
Jermaine Dye, I think, was in the outfield at that point, right?
yeah. They make it sound like
Yeah.
David Justice was a huge part of it too. David Justice was an also
That's right.
ran. He was
That's
that
right.
guy.
But no, it was Scott Hatteberg. It was
Yeah.
Scott Hatteberg that carried that team to the playoffs. Let's just make that clear. Uh-oh.
Man, we just this podcast came right off the rails. Uh-oh. Are we getting shown here?
Uh-oh. We
What is
are getting breaking news as we speak. Denver Nuggets have fired head coach Mike Malone. And aren't we like 5 minutes away from the end of the season? Jeez, man. I mean, first the Memphis Grizzlies decide to get rid of their coach just before the playoffs start, and now the Nuggets get rid of Mike Malone, man. It's so weird just how quickly things can change, man. It's like watching my 401k.
I'm going to put something on Twitter that Eric Olen is now a candidate for the Denver Nuggets job. Let's start that rumor. Let's do that. Eric Olen.
Yes, yeah, let's do that. How about Jason Eck too? While we're at it, I mean, because we know everybody wants Lobo coaches for some reason. I don't know why.
Zach Arnett just left the UNLV's program as a defensive coordinator yesterday. Maybe Eck will just leave here to go to Vegas instead. So you never. I'm going to tweet that out too. I'm going to tweet. According to a source at the New Mexican, Jason Eck is now a candidate for the defensive coordinator job at UNLV. I'll do that.
And there goes our there goes our guest for next week's podcast.
Yeah. Oh man.
Yeah, Jason's probably gonna put a little bullseye on with your picture on it. You start throwing darts at it.
All right. So what's the deal this week? What are you covering the rest of the week? And I'll tell you what I'm going to do, which is probably as little as humanly possible. But what are you going to do the rest of the week?
Well, I got a story coming up on Thursday, just about the Roseanne Nadell Memorial Invitational, the softball tournament St. Mike's has. It's named now for the last 9 years after the late softball coach who passed away, I think, in 2016.
Very mean teacher. I had her in high school, by the way.
Yes, you did. That's right.
Miss Nadell
she was
gave
also
me anxiety.
The only softball coach. The only softball coach St. Mike's had before her passing and everything. So, we're going to write a story about that and just kind of the legacy, because she's got their three of their best players. Their moms played for her back in the 90s or in the early 2000s. So we're going to do a story on that, and then I'm going to head up to Cleveland to kind of follow Bryce Melton and the Santa Fe High Demons, because they actually last year, and this is based because Melton had such a great year his sophomore year, and we thought that he would repeat it instead of the injuries getting to him. But now with him healthy, they have a really decent chance at maybe getting up on the podium, because they've got three really good sprinters. Obviously, Valen Wittenberg, who's the reigning 400 state champ. Obviously, Bryce is back to his old self, and then Cy Anderson, one of the top 400 runners in the state. They've got some really good sprinters. They got a really good sophomore long jumper and sprinter. So I'm going to be following them to see how they do over there. And then the district season for 2 AAA, which is the only reason why we watch baseball in the spring, because let's be honest, Santa Fe High, Capital, not really. And I know Capital has a winning record right now, but they really haven't played anybody. I mean, no offense. I know Coach Nick Salazar is probably not going to like hearing that, but hey, 9-6 is nice, but when you get into a district that includes El Dorado, La Cueva, Sandia, you might have needed to get a couple more wins to be able to give yourself a shot at maybe getting into the playoffs.
They did beat St. Mike's though. So
they did beat St. Mike's. Yeah. And St. Mike's beat the pants off of Santa Fe High. So clearly in the pecking order, Capital is above Santa Fe High. Yeah. Sorry about that, Brian Barker, but it is what it is. But getting back to my point, Thursday, we got a big District 2 AAA doubleheader between West Las Vegas and Santa Fe Indian School. The Dons are coming in 10-1. They're the top ranked team in the state according to the coaches poll and in Max Preps. So we'll find out how good they really are, because it seems like the last couple of years they've come in with a full head of steam going into district play, and then all of a sudden they kind of struggle there to start. Whether it's Robertson dropping a couple of games against Robertson, a couple of games against St. Mike's or Indian School. So we'll see if they're able to pull through. And now that we've given them some bulletin board material, I'm sure they'll probably sweep the Braves and credit me for the motivation.
I just want to apologize in advance to Bryce Melton, because the New Mexican Jinx is a living, breathing entity. And now that James has written about how he's back and his hamstring problems are behind him and he's looking like the kid he was 2 years ago, something terrible is going to happen to him. Thanks for that.
He's going to get hit by a meteorite. That's what it's going to be.
something awful is going to happen, and they're going to look at this podcast and they're going to play it over and over again. Barron, shut your pie hole, man. Come on,
we're done with that. We just need to do a podcast, just one episode, just on the New Mexican Jinx.
Oh man, it would have to be like a 5-part miniseries. It'd be like Chernobyl was on HBO, this long, drawn out thing. This weekend, not just to beat home the whole Santa Fe High baseball thing. I'm writing a story about how their cages collapsed. Their batting cages collapsed during a November snowstorm. They still have not been fixed. We went out there recently, shot that, and it's just this horrible collapsed Eiffel Tower remnant of what used to be a pretty neat thing. So we're going to write about that, and then, man, I can't wait for this weekend because it's the Masters, which eats up a ton of space in our section. So neither one of us is a big golfer, but the Masters is really good for inside copy in our section. So there you go.
It absolutely is, and I don't mind watching it, but playing golf, no, forget it, man.
No, and then look, I so many of my friends golf, but so many of my friends don't have kids. I have kids. I can't. If you have children, it's like, I think it's written into the bylaws of golf that you're not allowed to golf because it's just too. It's like skiing. It's too expensive. I don't have that kind of disposable income. So maybe once my kids grow up and move away in a few years, I could start golfing again. I'll be that old man wearing khaki shorts and a shirt that's too tight, and I'll be out there shooting like 115 every weekend. I'll do that.
Yeah, and be happy about it, right?
And be very happy about it.
I mean, and for the sake of full disclosure, I mean, a big reason why people golf is to drink, and unfortunately, you're not a drinker, so that kind of defeats the purpose of going out to the golf course.
I know, the drinking, the getting leathery skin from being out in the sun too much. Yeah, it's not working for me.
Which is weird because you're a baseball guy, so you think you would be that just because you were out in the sun so much.
This weekend, I plan to take in a little college baseball. I'm going to admit, I might actually peruse my way down to Portales to go see Lubbock Christian playing Eastern New Mexico. I might have to go see that. It'll be Paul Weir's former team, where
Paul, hottest Division II team in the state.
Really, yeah, exactly. There's only two options there, and the other one is terrible. So all you have to do is show up. So I might watch that. It'll be Paul Weir's former against his other school. So Lubbock Christian against Eastern New Mexico. So there you go.
Yeah.
But that'll bring us to the end of this podcast. I know you got to get up to the St. Mike's doubleheader today. So they're playing 1 or 2 games today.
2 games against Portales.
2 games. There you go. And then I'll be giving you the latest update on Lobo football and New Mexico Highlands basketball coach.
Yeah. So I wonder how much the value of UNM athletics goes up just by you pointing that out. I mean, it's got to be at least $20.
To our hundreds of thousands of podcast listeners and watchers, I'm sure they'll be selling this place out. They're going the NIL thing is going to go right through the ceiling just because of this. So you're welcome.
I love your math, man. We broke 1,000 and you're already at 12,000.
Right. Hundreds of thousands of podcast listeners who I can't even get my wife to watch this thing. But Sarah, you got to start paying attention, man. Come on.
Yeah, you do.
Come on. Yeah.
Yeah, you definitely do. And if you can make it to the end of one of these, boy, she is a much bigger trooper than I ever thought she was.
Yeah, she won't. She'll never do that. Yeah.
I mean, even our producer is like, dude, let's go.
He's giving us the just wrap it up. All right, well, that'll do it for this week. Next week we will have either Jason Eck or Eric Olen, or maybe both. Who knows? Maybe if I get them both at the same time, we can do that. But we'll finally have our first guest, whom I've cleared through UNM. Maybe. So Chanel ruined the whole thing. Maybe get Bryce Melton in the hospital recovering from a torn hamstring again. So, all right, that's it for the week.